Today, there are countries at the top of the world that takes to build an empire which spans continents and centuries. And more importantly, what causes these colossal powers to crumble into dust? From the sands of Persia to the shores of the British Isles, we'll explore the triumphs, the tragedies, and the timeless lessons these mighty civilizations have left behind. Let's start with the Achaemenid Empire, better known as the Persian Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great around 550 BC. Imagine a realm stretching from the Balkans to the Indus Valley, the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. Cyrus was a visionary. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a liberator, respected for his policies on human rights and religious tolerance, famously documented on the Cyrus cylinder. The Persians were masters of administration. They built the Royal Road, a highway that allowed messengers to travel over 1,600 miles in just 7 days. This, combined with a standardized currency and a sophisticated postal system, made managing their vast and diverse territory possible. Their cities, like Persepolis, were marvels of architecture and art, showcasing the wealth and power of the empire. But this golden age couldn't last forever. The Greco-Persian Wars, though not immediately fatal, were a significant drain on resources. A series of less capable rulers, internal rebellions, and heavy taxation weakened the empire from within. The final blow came from a young Macedonian king with immense ambition, Alexander the Great. In just a few years, his military genius dismantled the mighty Persian Empire, proving that no power is truly invincible. Fast forward over a millennium, and we arrive in the Iberian Peninsula, where the Spanish Empire began its ascent. The year 1492 was pivotal. Not only did the Reconquest end, uniting Spain under Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, but Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic, and knowingly opening the door to a new world. What followed was an explosion of exploration and conquest. Conquistadors like Hernan Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, driven by a lust for gold, glory, and God, toppled the Aztec and Inca empires. Spain suddenly controlled a vast territory, rich in silver and gold. This immense wealth flowed back to Europe, funding Spain's armies and making it the dominant power of the 16th and 17th centuries. The Spanish Armada was the most feared naval force of its time. However, this reliance on colonial riches was a double-edged sword. It led to massive inflation and stifled domestic industry. Constant wars in Europe, particularly against Protestant nations like England and the Netherlands, were incredibly costly. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 was a major psychological and naval blow. Over time, wars of independence in the American colonies during the early 19th century stripped Spain of its most valuable territories, leaving behind a legacy of language, religion, and culture, but marking the end of its global dominance. Now, let us cross the English Channel to the island nation that would build the largest empire in history, Britain. Starting as a collection of trading posts and colonies in the 17th century, the British Empire grew steadily. Its powerful Royal Navy was the key, securing trade routes and protecting its overseas territories. After defeating its main rival, France, in the 7 Years' War, Britain's dominance was undisputed. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain, giving it an unprecedented technological and economic advantage. Factories churned out goods that were sold across its vast empire, from Canada to India, Australia to Africa. It was famously said that the sun never set on the British Empire. However, the seeds of its decline were sown in its success. The desire for self-governance grew within the colonies. The 2 world wars, though Britain was on the winning side, were devastatingly expensive, leaving the country economically exhausted. A rising tide of nationalism across the globe made maintaining the empire untenable. India's independence in 1947 was a major turning point, and in the following decades, a wave of decolonization saw Britain's colonies become independent nations, transforming the empire into the modern Commonwealth. Speaking of Britain's great rival, let's look at the French Empire. France's imperial ambitions began in the 17th century with colonies in North America, the Caribbean, and India. Like Britain, its early empire was largely lost during the wars of the 18th century. But France had a second act. Under Napoleon Bonaparte, France briefly controlled most of continental Europe. Though this empire was short-lived, it spread the ideals of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity far and wide. After Napoleon's defeat, France embarked on building a new colonial empire, primarily in Africa and Southeast Asia. By the early 20th century, the French colonial empire was second in size only to Britain's. They saw their mission as a civilizing mission, aiming to assimilate colonial subjects into French culture. But this policy often created resentment. Like Britain, the World Wars weakened France significantly. The brutal and costly wars of independence in Vietnam and Algeria in the mid-20th century signaled the end was near. These conflicts drained French resources and morale, ultimately leading to the dissolution of its empire as colonies gained their independence. Finally, we turn to an empire that stood at the crossroads of Europe and Asia for over 600 years, the Ottoman Empire. Founded around 1299 by Osman I, it grew from a small Anatolian state into a vast, multicultural empire. Its peak came under Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century. The Ottomans controlled Southeast Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa. Their capital, Constantinople renamed Istanbul, was a bustling hub of trade and culture. The empire was known for its military might, particularly the elite Janissary corps, and its significant contributions to art, science, and architecture. But by the 17th century, things began to change. The failed siege of Vienna in 1683 marked a turning point. The empire faced technological and economic stagnation compared to a rapidly industrializing Europe. It became known as the sick man of Europe. A series of military defeats and the rise of nationalism among its diverse ethnic groups chipped away at its territories. The fatal blow was its decision to side with the Central Powers in World War I. Defeat led to its complete dismantling, with its remaining territories carved up by the victorious Allied powers, and the modern Republic of Turkey rising from its ashes in 1922. So, what can we learn from these epic stories? We see a pattern: a visionary start, military and administrative genius, and economic prosperity leading to a golden age. But then, overexpansion, costly wars, internal corruption, economic troubles, and the failure to adapt to new challenges inevitably lead to decline. Each empire, in its own way, shows us that power is fleeting, and that the seeds of destruction are often planted during the height of success. The legacies of these empires are still all around us, in the languages we speak, the borders of modern nations, and the complex cultural connections that span the globe. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible historical journey. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into history,